and immunization. I will just be getting this kicked off. The expert in the room for us is going to be Dr. Ross and her associate who she's brought online with her. But let me go ahead and just give some of the ground rules first. And then after that, Karen Parkman will be doing roll call for our official people. And then we will turn it over to Dr. Ross to talk about what the problem is, what the potential solution is. And then she has somebody she'd like to introduce. And after that point, we'll be discussing and getting public comment and your opinion on where we are on all this. And when you start speaking, Dr. Ross, I will put the roll up so people can see it on their screen. So to begin with, this is the official advisory committee meeting. It is open to the public. As of right now, I believe we only have 2 commissioners on. If a third commissioner were to join the call, I would have to make a statement about they are not allowed to vote. So I'm going to say that in advance, just in case a third one comes, because this is all votes have to be in a prearranged period at the commission meetings. But we only have 2 commissioners here, so I think we're in good standings for that. The only people who are allowed to participate in this meeting are the people who are from the ORC staff, the commissioners, and the appointed people that have been invited to this list and have received appointment letters. And Karen will be reading their names off here in a minute. The public is certainly welcome to listen in. And at the end, we will do public comment for any comments that they have about this discussion. In addition, there will be a hearing for this rule, regardless of, provided it goes through after this, unless there's some reason we decide not to have the rule. There will be a hearing for this rule, and the public is welcome also to provide a public comment then, or they can submit it to Karen at any time. But for the purpose of this meeting, we are reducing the number of participants to just the ones that have been officially appointed to this committee. Before I turn off to Karen, I would like to give a special thanks to 2 people who are on the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indians. That is Lawanda Bronson and where's the other guy? Raymond. I'm going to say your name wrong. Husty? You're on mute. Husties, sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, we've been trying to get the tribes to participate in some of these forever. As I told Raymond earlier, Lawanda, I have a particularly soft spot in my heart for your tribe in particular, because my son did his internship there one summer when he was in law school and told me a lot about the experiences he had, how much he loved out there. We drive through there every year on our way to Union. I'm like, I should stop and talk to those people, but I don't have any reason to talk to them yet. So I'm hoping by you guys being here, we learn more about you and what you're doing as well, and we can continue to work together. With that, I'm turning over to Karen for the roll call. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. For the record, my name is Karen Parkman, and I serve as the Director of Administration for the agency. Sounds like a jet taking off. Okay, are we good? All right, so for roll call, as far as committee members, we have Randy Bowden, Executive Director for OHBPA. Randy, are you here? I'm just going to move on. Ben Root, Secretary Treasurer of OHBPA. Ben, are you here?
Yes, Ben Root is here.
Okay, good. Thanks.
Ben Root is here. Okay.
Okay.
Yep. I'm going to mute myself now.
Okay. Rob Keene, veterinarian, senior professional service vet, equine for Bowinger, Ingelheim,
Yeah.
Animal Health
Beringer,
USA.
Ingelheim Animal Health. Yep, I'm here.
Okay. Sorry if I messed
No
that
worries.
up. Okay. Steve Smith, Director of Tillamook County Fairgrounds. Steve, are you here? Rod Lowe, President of Southern Oregon Horse Racing Association. I see you're here, but I think you're muted. Oh, just raise your hand. It's okay. All right. And then Rod Lowe again is also representing the Horse Racing Association, HRA. He is CEO of HRA. Connie Erickson, President, Oregon Thoroughbred Owners and Breeders Association.
Here.
Okay. Doug Smith, President, Crooked River Roundup. Doug, are you here?
He may have calves being born now.
Chris Philbrook, President, Oregon Quarter Horse Association.
Here.
Okay. Patty Harris, Board Member, Oregon Quarter Horse Association. Patty, are you here? Nate Jacobs, President, Eastern Oregon Livestock Show.
I don't think we've ever had this many people not show up.
Yeah.
Each with their
Nate, you're not
band.
here? Okay, well, they might come on a little bit late, maybe. Lawanda Bronson, member Confederated Tribes of Umatilla Indian, which I think we heard from you, but go ahead and.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. And Raymond Husties?
Houston's.
Husties,
Houston's, thank you.
Board of Trustees Treasurer, Confederated Tribes of Umatilla. Thank you. Okay, and then Connie, did you want me to introduce staff or?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. For ORC staff, we have Dr. Carly Ross, Senior Veterinarian.
Hello,
Yeah.
here.
Mike Twiggs, Presiding Steward. Mike, are you here? Chris Montesino, Chief Investigator.
I'm here.
Connie Wynn, Executive Director.
Here.
Myself, Karen Parkman. Yes, I'm present. And Malia Tom, Administrative Specialist.
I'm here.
I think that's everybody.
And then we have two commissioners here, Dr. Harvey Stein,
Here.
and we have Commissioner Lindsay Fowler.
I'm here.
There you go. All right, with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Ross to talk about what the issue is and why it's important, and then you can introduce your guest and we go back for discussion.
Yeah, hello, good morning. So we're trying to implement this new law to further protect the health of the racehorses. It's just a perfect storm. You know, these horses are stressed and they come into the barns and there's a high density. These are the vaccinations that we want to require are for equine herpes virus and equine influenza virus, which are airborne, passed through nasal discharge and through aerosols. So yeah, they're not 100% these vaccines, and Dr. Keene will be able to give us more information on that, but they can definitely decrease the shedding and the spread of these disease if the horses are all vaccinated. Most boarding facilities, most racetracks in other states require this, and so we're just trying to get ourselves up to those standards. But yeah, oh, there you go. But I can hand it over to Dr. Keene, who can talk more about the vaccines, as that's what he works for Boehringer Ingelheim, which manufactures a lot of these really high-end vaccines.
All right, I put together about a 10-minute overview of the disease and the challenges there. Is that going to be helpful, or you want to just get right to it?
I think that would be very helpful. Do you have a presentation you want to share? We could make sure that you're able to share.
Yes, I do.
Malia, do we need to do anything special?
I don't think I should need to add permissions. Do you see a sharing option at the top of your
I
screen?
do. I'm going to do it right now.
Beautiful.
Can you guys see that okay?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Everybody hear me all right? Okay, because I can't see you now. So yeah, I work for Boehringer Ingelheim Animal Health. Just to give me a little background of, I was in equine practice in Southern California for about 10 years. I did a little work had some clients that had running quarters, thoroughbreds at the Southern California racetracks. Went to work at Fort Dodge Animal Health. Did that for 10 years. And they had innovated in a lot of different vaccines, West Nile in particular. Went to work for IDEX Labs, developed a lot of the molecular diagnostics that we use for testing for these diseases. And for the last 16 years, I've been at BI Animal Health. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different diseases that we worry about, and I know we're focused on influenza and herpes. They're two different kettles of fish, but many times we don't make a diagnosis. Is the point that pie graph shows how, even though we may have a horse that's febrile and sick, a lot of times we don't get specific answers. This is really important, and I took the liberty. I don't know if your website is accurate as far as your fair circuit days in the summertime, but this really comes into play. And if that's the case and you don't have any winter type racing any longer, this is the incidence of disease. And if you look at the olive with respect to EHV1, you can see it is much more common in the wintertime, starting in November, January, February, March, April timeframe is when we see the most cases of EHV1. Influenza's in the blue, and we certainly see that in the wintertime as well. And so the reason why I'm even bringing this up is there's some talk about kind of turning the vaccination scheduling, if you will, sort of upside down, based on it's always better if we try to protect horses prior to the peak incidence of disease. The reason it's not, my computer is frozen. Okay. Of course. Mm-hmm. Of course, this is happening. All right. Let me. All right, we're gonna have to. There we go. Okay, that's all it took. So anyway, there's a group that looks at influenza cases that occur all over the world, and they make recommendations for the various vaccine companies. And that's important to know, just because not all vaccines are created equal. Come on, guys. Helps us. All right. There is kind of a sort of a deal going around that, okay, all these flu rhino vaccines are pretty much the same. And this was a study, if you can see, are you guys seeing the small screen or not? Do I need to change this? Yeah, okay, this should be better. As you can see, this is a study we did quite a few years ago, where we took all the flu rhino vaccines and looked at the influenza portion of it. And you can see the difference between the red line and the yellow line are significant. And so there are a lot of things that can make vaccines better, newer vaccine technology. With influenza, since that mutates, just like our human, we get a new human vaccine every year. Horses, the flu does not mutate as often. And so we're still have 20-year-old, 23-year-old influenza strains in the vaccines, but because this group kind of keeps an eye on what's going on, they're still helpful. And then there's components in the vaccine that can make it better. In our situation, since we were very late to the party, we actually improved things by removing a lot of extraneous protein and cellular debris. And so the immune system is not near as confused as it would be if you had a lot of material that was left over from the manufacturing process. And then the other thing, and the question to ask is, do you actually have challenge studies? And that's where we vaccinate some horses. We leave some horses as unvaccinated controls. And then we actually blow live virus up their nose and try to see how well the vaccine pulled up. And so, and not to be shamelessly commercial, but that's kind of what we have shown through our challenge studies, that the influenza portion will last 6 months. And we've proven that based on actually trying to cause disease in the laboratory. So moving on to herpes 1, which is what everybody is worried about. It's closed down, racetracks and equine facilities and events all over the world for that matter. And I just pulled this a couple weeks ago, looking at the number of cases that have been reported. I encourage you, especially with this big herpes outbreak we had in Waco, Texas in November, just before the NFR, and I encourage you, there's so much misinformation on the internet, and there's a group that our equine practitioner group supports called the Equine Disease Communication Center. And that's where I send everybody if you want to know exactly what's going on as far as the number of cases, because they actually tap into the state vets and stuff like that. So you can see there is a respiratory form of VHV1, there's an abortion form of VHV1, and then the EHM is actually the neurologic form. And you can kind of see what's happened. And this is just in 2026 so far this year. So this virus commonly affects young horses, from weaning to 2 to 3 years of age. And if they get the disease, the immunity does not last very long. But just like herpes simplex, the cold sore virus in humans, this virus can get into a horse's system and just hang out in the presence of a good immune system. And it hides out in the lymph nodes and the trigeminal ganglia of the head. And then horses get it early in life, and then he waits for a stressful situation to kind of allow this virus to grow and potentially cause problems with spreading respiratory disease, or the thing we worry about the most is obviously the neurologic form. And the diagnosis is pretty straightforward, but we kind of have to keep in mind that this PCR is a very sensitive test. I have a terrible story. The fairgrounds racetrack in New Orleans got closed down a few years ago. It says 5 or 6 years ago now. And it's because they tested a horse that didn't have clinical signs or a fever. And this virus will shed sometimes in normal horses. And then there's no reason to test a horse that's not symptomatic. Then the other thing, just to confuse everybody, is we have 3 different strains of this virus. One of them is caused the neurologic strain. The other is called the wild type or the non-neuro strain. And the problem is both of these strains cause disease. So that's just unfortunately confusing everybody, and it confuses veterinarians along with horse owners. So EHM is referred to a horse that has herpes virus 1 that is neurologic. And that stands for equine herpes myeloencephalitis, or an inflammation of the brain and spinal cord due to the virus, versus EHV means just they've got the herpes virus and no neurologic signs. So obviously biosecurity, hopefully this doesn't happen to you guys, but stopping all horse movement, isolating sick horses away from healthy horses, everybody. The big thing to do is to start tepping twice a day whenever you have a febrile horse, especially horses that are adjacent. And then screening horses or testing horses just to kind of figure out, okay, who's the typhoid Mary that is causing problems. Now I'm going to play these two videos, and there's a difference in this disease between old horses and young horses. And the horse on the right, this was a challenge study that we do. I mean, when we're trying to do vaccine research, we want to try to reproduce this in the laboratory. And we took these horses from northwestern Montana, and we gave them neurologic herpes virus in the nose and in the vein 3 days in a row. I mean, we gave enough virus to cause all sorts of mayhem. And this was 7 days after that, and we set up a little obstacle course because these horses were not, they weren't hunter broke, and we could not fault this horse on the right at all neurologically. And so that's because this horse was 18 months old and has an intact immune system that functions very well. Okay, let's move to the video on the left-hand side. These horses were challenged with neurologic herpes virus genotype. They just got it one time, but what happened with them is they were old. Their immune system isn't up to snuff. They don't have the cell-mediated immunity to be able to fight off the virus. And so moving forward, and there is a current study going on to try to make a better vaccine that's actually labeled for neurologic disease here at Michigan State, and they're going to be challenging horses. But rather than using the horse on the right, they're going to be using these older horses. So in young horses, normally we'll see a fever. Sometimes you'll see first, and then you'll see neurologic disease after that. And because they've got a great immune system, it usually doesn't last very long, and the neurologic disease isn't near as bad as an older horse, as you saw in those videos. And this is a perfect case just to talk a little bit about the genotype fiasco that somebody long before my time named these non-neuro and neuro genotypes of the virus. We had a very large outbreak in numerous states back in 2011 after a cutting event in Ogden, Utah. And there was a couple thousand horses there, and they spread all over Canadian provinces into 10 different states in the US. And it was because the first case occurred when everybody was leaving after a 1 week long show. This particular disease spread a lot of different places, versus the Valencia, Spain outbreak, which was the non-neuro form that was caused quite a little bit of mortality and fatalities in that particular outbreak. So just so that, as you're maybe researching this, both neuro and non-neuro strains can cause neurologic disease, and some diseases will have mixed isolates. I like to know what we're dealing with because the neurogenotype of this virus sheds at a much higher level. And so you got to really be additionally careful with some of your biosecurity efforts. So what can we expect about vaccines, and what can they do? They are labeled for prevention of respiratory disease and abortion. There is no claim to prevent neuro, but vaccinating horses against this virus will reduce the severity of clinical disease, will limit how much is spread out the nose if they do come down with this disease, and decreases viremia. And viremia is virus in the bloodstream. And if you can eliminate viremia, you can eliminate neurologic disease, because that viremia is where we see inflammation of the brain and spinal cord. And there's a lot of different information out there talking about, do we actually vaccinate in the face of an outbreak, or we do not? And actually some of the information, the new information I'm going to share with you real quick, shows that maybe there is a benefit for vaccinating in the face of an outbreak. So let's just move on to the approval process. Now, I took this off the web. It doesn't matter which vaccine you're talking about, but the USDA only requires a challenge study. Now, this is to get a label for prevention of respiratory disease. with 2 doses administered 21 days apart. Now, these horses were naive. They didn't have, they were negative to this disease prior to seeing the vaccine. And in this situation, they basically challenged these horses very quickly, like 3 weeks after the booster dose, right? And that's because this vaccine doesn't function, as well as like influenza does. In the case of influenza, we challenged horses 6 months after this booster dose. So again, this particular disease or this particular virus, horses don't create a fantastic immunity to. Now, there's some new tests, and this is brand new information over the last couple of years. I just wanted to go through it real quick. These are available at Cornell, and it's called the EHV1 Risk Assessment Evaluation. And basically what they've done is they've found special antibodies, if you will, or isotypes, part of the EHV1 serum antibodies that appear to be the key. And they appear to be those antibodies that, if they're present, will reduce shedding and viremia. And they've kind of got a matrix here. If you pull a blood sample and you test a horse, and this is for people that get a new horse, they want to know, okay, what's going on? What's my horse's potential risk for EHV1? You can see there, very low risk if the antibody levels are greater than 12,000 or 10,000 with the IgG4/7 versus a horse at high risk, which has less than 3,000 or less than 400. So basically, this, again, brand new information from 2024, where they looked at what happens when you challenge horses or you blow EHV1 virus up the horse's nose. And in the horse that's non-immune, you can see the viral challenge there on day 0. I'm not sure if my pointer's showing up, but on day 0, you can see basically this is a horse that doesn't have immunity, hasn't been vaccinated, or hasn't been challenged. You can see pretty quickly after you squirted up the horse's nose, they develop a fever, and then shortly thereafter, they start shedding out their virus out their nasal passage. And then it takes about 8 or 9 days for these protective antibodies to start being produced. And these are all made by B cells, cells in the bone marrow and the lymph nodes. Move on to the immune horse, a horse that actually has sensitized, or horses that have been vaccinated appropriately. They actually have memory antibodies in their nasal passages. And when you go ahead and you challenge horses with a bunch of virus up the nose, you can see what happens differently here. In 1 or 2 days, we get this helpful IgG4/7 antibodies, and we don't have any nasal shedding. So this is some new information. We went through and looked at all our particular vaccines and showed that we have, good antibody responses. So the last thing I'll leave you with, and this was just published this summer, is one of our flu rhino products called Calvenza. The researchers at Cornell wanted to see what happened if we gave it 6 different times, which you'd never do in the real world. Can we hyper immunize these horses and actually see the antibodies in the nose? Now, obviously, that's how the horses shed the virus. So the protective antibodies in the nose would be huge. And basically, they showed after just 1 booster dose of Calvenza in the muscle, they showed these protective IgG4/7 antibodies in the green there. So what it's done, quite frankly, just over the last few months here, sort of changed how I think about responding if we have an outbreak and we have a horse that's not directly exposed to this virus in the middle of the outbreak. We might want to consider vaccinating them. So again, obviously, you guys, if in fact you guys just have summer racing, the risk is going to be much lower. But certainly, and that's the problem with herpes versus influenza. If you have a good flu vaccine, every 6 months works fine. But just to let you know, I mean, every 6 months for herpes virus, because horses just don't respond as well, is maybe asking a lot for a vaccine. So that is all I had. I will stop sharing and then entertain any questions you might have. I know it was a lot of information. It's very confusing. Normally that takes about an hour. So I cut it down to 10 minutes for you. So
Dr.
Any-
Keen, the way
Sure.
ours is currently written, it says within 180 days for these. Would you recommend that we change that based on the information you just gave us?
Well, I think, yeah, and that's what the USCF has done. And not to blow your mind completely, and this, I hesitate to even mention this, but some of the gurus, now we have no data and we have, um, and we just, we don't have any studies or anything that proves this. But because of where the incidence of this disease occurs, like, November, December, January, February, March, there's some leaders and that are thinking maybe we ought to be more strategic. Maybe we ought to basically vaccinate horses in October, January, and March for herpes and give them the rest of the year off. And I guess I'm not necessarily, oh no, this makes my hair fall out because it's going to be a paradigm shift. Everybody wants everything to be easy. I guess what I would do if if you're just racing in the summer, I would want to see a booster within 3 months. And in a properly vaccinated horse. I mean, that's better science, I think, being more strategic and not assuming that, where we see vaccines fall apart is in that 5 to 6 months after the booster, whether it's influenza or whether it's herpes. And again, sorry to blow your mind. Don't shoot the messenger here, but I'm just giving you my honest opinion.
Any questions for Dr. Keen? Dr. Stein, Commissioner Stein.
Yeah, one of the difficulties that we will have in implementing any sort of recommendation or actual policy is that there are a whole lot of Facebook veterinarians, you might call them. There's so much information and misinformation out there. And I do believe that the recommendation should be at 90 days, or even possibly 60 days before the beginning of the race meet, or we might call it 60 days before the fairs begin. And that will carry people. You're in the 90-day for the first part of the meets, and then as time goes on, of course, that immunity is going to wane, but it's better than nothing. And it's just, it is confusing. I've been practicing for 40 years. I'm now retired, but it is one of the most confusing things, especially talking about EHM and all the confusion about what causes it. I've even read, online that people are saying that vaccination actually causes the neurologic form, and there's just so much, misinformation. However, I think we have to, whatever we decide to do should be based on, I think, the recommendations of experts. And that's going to be hard, actually, not hard to implement, but hard to convince people.
Yeah. Well, and I would encourage you, I mean, the Equine Disease Communication Network, or the EDCC, really, I mean, there is a ton of information in there, and that's what I encourage all veterinarians, look at that. I mean, they've got disease information, vaccination information. Again, these things are risk-based vaccines based on what they're doing, but I couldn't agree with you more on your thinking. That would be a perfect situation if you can swing it, as far as you being, more aggressive with respect to the herpes portion. And again, there's less disease in the summer, which is going to help you too, even though you're got a highly stressed population. And, you know, a lot of times the vaccine stuff is all over the place. One vaccine's not going to do it. I mean, you need to have a properly vaccinated horse that's been primed and boosted. So therein lies, you know, a huge education for owners and stuff like that too. I totally get it.
So our rule also states all equines must have proof of immunization, blah, 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 within the past 180 days. It does not address a second dose. Would you recommend that that language be changed because of that?
It is so hard to police. I mean, you guys are in a no-win situation. I mean, I bless you for trying to do the right thing here. The, yes, to answer your question shortly, but I mean, trying to implement that could be very difficult. Certainly, you know, 60 to 90 days prior to the thing is a huge, you know, advance. And I mean, I've been doing this gig for 45 years and it's job security because we still talk about the need for boosters and nobody gets it yet. So I'm either not a very good messenger or it's just the way it is.
Any other questions for the doctor?
I have one.
Okay.
Thanks, Doc. Since I got the email saying that I'm on this, I did a little bit of studying and research. So, the American Association of Equine Practitioners, their recommendation for this is an annual revaccination, and Oregon is we're wanting to go every 6 months versus the annual. So 1 year and then 6 months, 180 days is basically 6 months. So my concern is, are we over vaccinating? And I know a lot of vaccines, the suspension liquid can have a reaction to horses, and you know, I'm looking out for the future. Are we making our horses weaker? I mean, you know, it's just one of them things like you brought up earlier, Mr. Stein said, you know, we're going to be dealing with a lot of armchair veterinarians, and it's going to be difficult. Thank you.
Basically to answer, you know, that question, and we get it all the time, you know, you're in the middle of an outbreak and okay, my horse got a vaccine, you know, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months ago. Do we booster this horse that hasn't been exposed? And in talking with the gurus, I think probably every 2 months, because way back when I was a baby vet and we didn't have great vaccines, we were doing it every 60 days, 90 days. That's just what we did not have a lot of data, you know, things were changing a lot. Um, and so that's what we did, not knowing any different. Well, now we've got better vaccine technology, better purification. We've identified the strains that are necessary. And when I've held some people a lot smarter than me's feet to the fire, I think recommending every 60 days is probably a little too often with respect to your question, but every 3 months in some situations is probably more ideal. And that's kind of how I answer the situation, because in 40 years we've come a long way with better vaccines. And then on the vaccination causing problems, I mean, that was the rumor 45 years ago, that we're causing antigen antibody complexing in the central nervous system. I mean, I fought that. I had somebody trying suing me in practice 45 years ago because of that, and that has been totally debunked through science. There's vasculitis occurring in the capillaries that supply the central nervous system, and that's where the inflammation's coming from. And has nothing to do with antibodies that would have been, you know, stimulated from over vaccinating, if you will. So I hear you. Again, there's a million different things on the internet, and like I said, again, bless you for trying to do the right thing. But that's kind of how I answer those things. Probably every, 6 weeks to 60 days is way too over frequently. We don't know whether the frequency of that is, going to cause a problem. But certainly every 3 months from talking to people, again, smarter than me, they said, that's reasonable in high risk situation. And the AEP, I've been on that committee developing the AEP vaccine recommendations. They always cover our fannies by saying any horses at high risk need to be dealt with differently. And so you're dealing with a high risk population. But yeah, it is. And a lot of these labels on vaccines that have been around for 40 years, they have an annual revac on the label, and that's where that information is coming from, even though it's not based on any science. And as hopefully you got clear on the EHV1 respiratory, those horses only showed 3 weeks duration of immunity, not a year duration of immunity, because there's not enough difference in the controls and the vaccinates to get those things approved. But again, it's the federal government giving you the recipe of what you need to do with respect to getting a respiratory EHV1 label. But again, not necessarily science, but that's the way it is.
And we have one more question. Luanda?
Yes. For me, how long does the vaccine last? Like you said, 3 weeks? 3 months?
Yeah, it really depends on, did that horse get a priming dose and a booster 3 weeks later? And it's all the basis. It's just like the COVID vaccines, if you got the mRNA killed, it wasn't modified live, you had to get a booster, or you didn't get the immunity that you should get. That's probably the first question that needs to get asked. Again, if you're using our stuff or one other company's stuff, the flu part's going to last 6 months based on, at least our stuff based on challenge. And then, we can't expect horses that get sick with this disease only have immunity for 2 months to 3 months. So we can never expect a vaccine to work better than actually getting the disease. So that's kind of how I answer that question.
Okay, so I've had a perfectly well horse. I know the horse. Okay, so the vaccines were not, she didn't do well with vaccines. We're going to Las Vegas. I did not give her a vaccine. Well, you better have records of the vaccine. Giving her the shot, you better have the records. So we gave her the shot and she died. So I think that the health issue for the horse itself is to be understand your horse. And I know there's these viruses, but what are they getting stuck with as a racehorse besides all these viruses? They're probably getting what? Lasix, whatever. They're stressed, they're being raced, they're being used. And to give them more vaccines within what, 3 months? I just think it's overexposure to vaccines. And their immune system, their self. That's just my opinion.
Luanda, you did bring up something I want to address real quickly. I apologize. I have a Great Dane. I can't have a horse in the house. Dr. Ross and I spoke this morning, and she talked about possible exception. Dr. Ross, would you like to talk about that? Would that have helped her versus that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what happened with your horse specifically, and it's known that vaccines can cause anaphylaxis and death in very, very rare situations, but there's some horses that have reactions. They're just more sensitive and they either colic or they have malaise for longer than another horse would. So, I mean, there's pre-treating that most vets, if they know that's the case, can address these things. You can pre-treat with antihistamines and steroids or NSAIDs. And I would say for the vast majority of horses, that's always going to be enough. cases where horses actually die from a vaccine are very, very rare. We give, I mean, I don't even know what the incidence is, but it's very small. And most of these companies also, if you vaccinate your horse, they will, provide some diagnostics, and they actually stand behind their horses or behind their vaccines, and will help you if your horse does come down with these illnesses. So I hear your concern, but it is not a common. I mean, I vaccinate hundreds and hundreds of horses, and they're fine. So that is the exception to the rule.
Yeah, and there are other options with intranasal administration, of various things if you're having intermuscular, issues in some individuals. So yeah, and I'm glad, Dr. Ross, glad you brought up the assurance program. Yeah, I mean our vaccines over the last few years, there's 16, 17 million of them have been administered, and we get very few phone calls reporting any lack of efficacy reports where the vaccine did not work. And that's a very good thing to mention, that if you use our stuff and your horse has respiratory disease, it's always like, okay, I spent all this money, I vaccinated the horse, now what? We always support diagnostics for the veterinarian to figure out what's going on. And it's good business and good science, and 99% of the time it vindicates us because there's a whole bunch of other things that we don't have vaccines for. So.
I want to turn to Dr. Stein. After Dr. Stein goes, I want to hear from the industry on the problems from a racetrack perspective or a trainer's perspective on doing this, what the negative consequences might be or what the positive might be from your perspective. So please, Dr. Stein, go ahead.
Yeah, I would just like to say that we haven't talked about the consequences of not having a good vaccination program. So you get one horse with EHM, now you're dealing with quarantine. So when we deal with reportable diseases, that's just mandatory. And so if we have an outbreak really is considered one horse. You have one horse with EHM or suspected EHM, every horse in that barn area, and we've got, depending on the racetrack you're at, I mean, you could take Tillamook, for example, you get one horse with EHM in one of those big long barns. I don't know how many horses that is, but you're talking about basically closing down the race meet. So it's really, we're attempting to prevent something like that. I just wanted to be clear that what we're trying to prevent.
Rod, and please, just for the record, let us know where you're from, since everybody doesn't know all this. Oh, you're still, we're not able to hear you. Are you able to click on your mic and see if there's another choice, or? That's on. Rod wants to talk. Perhaps you have a phone you can call the
I'm
number
gonna
in.
see if I can unmute him.
Try that.
Let me see if I can get in and get him unmuted here.
Leah, are you picking on Rod?
No, I'm not. Okay, well, it shows him unmuted.
Yeah, this is indicative
Rod,
of an issue at Rod's side.
Yeah, Rod, I just muted you. Go ahead and unmute yourself one more time and see if it does anything.
I think your best option is to call the number in.
Can he
Now-
write something in the chat? Is there a chat he can?
He could write
There is
a
a
chat,
chat.
but if he can call, that would probably be more meaningful. Is there someone else who'd like to talk in the meantime?
So I guess I'll ask you a question, being a layman in this part of it. This is Randy Bodine, Executive Director of the HPPA. So if we were to do the immunity right before we start racing in the first week of June. Could that realistically stretch until racing is over in the second week of October? It would be slightly over 90 days, but just curious, since the idea that wintertime would draw a lot more potential risk. I'm just curious if that's a viable option.
Yeah, I just my 2 cents. I think it's better than just saying every 6 months and having it, where you're trying to control the situation as best you can when you're racing me what's going on.
And just for the record, the way this rule was written, I apologize, our window cleaners are here at the same time. It wasn't specifically to say 6 months, it just said prior, 180 days prior. So if somebody didn't want to vaccinate in the winter when they probably need it most, they didn't have to. But again, it doesn't look like we're going that way anyway. Anybody else?
Yes, Connie, this is Ben Root. I'd be happy to talk about just for a second what we do at our vet practice as veterinarians, and then also as owners and trainers.
Please, that would be great. And let us know where you're coming from. I mean, most of us know, but not everybody.
Yeah, my name is Ben Root. I'm the practice manager at Oakhurst Equine Veterinary, one of the larger private practices in Oregon. We use about 3,000 doses of the Boehringer Calvenza, which is a flu rhino vaccine. Our strong recommendations to our clients is twice a year. So in the spring, we generally give the yearly vaccines recommended by AEP, and we give a Calvenza, a flu rhino, and then we do it again in the fall. We have had a few reactions when given by a doctor. BI stands behind their product and has helped us with diagnostics and sometimes treatment. We have had one, I recall, in the last 9 years, horse that got flu that was vaccinated. BI was fantastic. I do understand completely the fear of vaccinating a horse that has shown prior reactions. So I think that is some exceptions that we need to take into consideration, in my opinion. As the good doctor said, there are ways to pre-medicate with NSAIDs or break the vaccine up into a couple of different times over 2 weeks or whatever, but it becomes complicated. And I do have a little bit of concern of forcing vaccines onto people, but our recommendation is definitely 6 months. Just to tie on to what the doctor said, we can't tell our clients to vaccinate the face of an outbreak, but Dr. Root, who many of you know as my father, 73, owns the practice, been here in Oregon for over 40 years practicing. When his horses start to get sick, he does vaccinate them. We cannot tell clients that at this point, we feel, but he does. There is something to be said for that. As a participant and a veterinarian, I can tell you that some owners are going to want to do it themselves, quote unquote. So you're going to have a hard time with proof, maybe receipts from Coastal or Wilco or whatever, maybe. Most of our shows that our clients go to, obviously some of the stateside racing, they require it to be administered by a veterinarian. So you will have a little bit of pushback from the industry saying it's raising their costs. But that's kind of where we stand as a practice, and we definitely vaccinate our horses twice a year that go to racing.
You'll need to mute your computer now, so we're not getting an echo. And with that, are you done, Ben? Or did you have more?
Yes, ma'am. Ben Root.
All right, great. Rod, go ahead. I heard you before for a minute. Now I don't hear you at all.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, I think the challenges of our industry are going to be, is it echoing? Is my phone call echoing?
No, you're good.
Okay, it's just on my end, I guess. The challenges are going to be the racetrack and monitoring this. And Ben kind of touched on it. You know, we have a industry that's I hate to say, but our horsemen are not wealthy horsemen, and to be able to vaccinate the horses by a veterinarian, it's not so much the cost of the vaccination itself, it's the cost of, if you're having to pre-vaccinate before you get to the racetrack, then you have this farm call, and your farm call is 10 times as much as what the vaccination is going to be, to be able to vaccinate your horses, whether you have 1 horse or 30 horses. But, and then the other part for the racetrack is trying to monitor this and trying to keep track of it. And I don't know whose job that's going to be. I guess it's going to fall on the racetrack to try to monitor this of the vaccinations. So I have some real concerns on how this is going to work. I mean, we have a hard enough time trying to just do it with the Coggins test and trying to get that done. And now we're adding a whole other layer of this, and especially if you go to, you know, less than the 6 months, like Randy was asking, can we do it one time before the race meet starts, so we don't have to try to track people down again during race meets and trying to make sure that they're getting horses vaccinated. I think this is great, and I think it's important, but this is a whole nother layer that's put on racetracks and horsemen that I think is going to be a challenge.
We have 3 minutes left. We're committed to ending at 10 o'clock, and I know that there's going to be more comment. You can certainly write or call anything in, but I want to give time for public comment. Are there any last minute comments? We could take one more from the participants. Otherwise, I'm going to turn over to public comment. We will, of course, have public hearings on this and more discussion. I think we have more work to do on this rule. Anybody else from the committee? Connie Erickson.
I agree with Rod's concerns because a lot of the horsemen do work on a pretty tight budget. So I don't know if there's any way to subsidize the vaccinations, because I think the vaccinations are very important. Despite what they might cost, they can potentially save the same horseman thousands of dollars in the event that a horse gets sick. So I think it's very important. I don't know how the heck you're going to track it. And I don't know if there's any way to subsidize the cost to these people, but that's my comment.
It's something I think about is maybe saying when you get to the track, you get it. So it'd be a lot easier at the track where we have one vet walking around. Maybe it's when you get to the track, but that's something we still need to work on. I agree. These are good points. A public comment. Okay, this is going to be the first call ever where we didn't have public comment. All right, again, I thank you all very much. Important part of this process, all of your comments, tender advisement, we'll figure out where to go from here. It seems like we have more work to do and more research to do, but it's a good starting point. Thank you very much for everybody's participation. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.